Let me tell you about a story. Now we better talk bound about the law enforcement, a right bunch of clowns, how they wear their badge like a plastic crown.
This is a good one. I like it.
Which they are now bound.
What's that?
It's a rabbit hole they don't want you to go down. But over in Wisconsin, they're doubling down.
Hello, everybody.
Then they did it again. They did not count on filmmakers
Making it in.
They thought their lives were safe. All went by the ruse.
They did not figure on 19 million views.
It'll make you shake your head and probably frown. But over in Wisconsin, they're doubling down. I said they're double down. And
So
they'll
triple down.
They're headed down a road which they cannot turn around. They walk around like they'll be home free. Because they control all the evidence on the local judges and found is the state's AG. But I got some news. It's as plain as day. It doesn't matter what the state or the guilters say. Because we got Kathleen.
She's got him in her sights. She's a real life hero, turning wrongs to rights.
No matter how hard that state's gavel pounds, over in Wisconsin, they're coming down. I said no matter how hard that state's gavel pounds, their house of cards isn't coming down. It'll make you shake your head and probably frown. Said over in Wisconsin, they're coming down. Over in Wisconsin, they're coming down.
All right. Hello, everybody. The long-awaited, I guess, wait for getting Scooby on. I know we were supposed to be here yesterday and everything, but, good things come to those who wait. And today we have Scooby here to talk about the DNA in the bones and to answer the submitted questions that were submitted yesterday on the video that we made yesterday. So those of you who submitted your questions there, I think we're getting all of those questions here today. And then we're most likely at the very, very end. So save your questions to the very, very end. But at the very, very end, we'll probably take maybe a handful more questions, possibly from the live chat. So, as I said, save it for the end. You don't want it to get forgot all the way in the beginning of the live chat and nobody remembers it. Yeah. Oh, there's still feedback. Scoobs, you got to put your earphones in.
Okay, on the computer. I've got so many. You got people. I need a tech guru.
Right? Yeah, you need a telephone operator, right?
Oh my gosh, I'm so sorry, people. This is all my fault. I've pulled out the wine. I got the iPad. I got the computer. I got the phone because I wanted to be on the camera. And Scooby has.
If you ask most of the ladies in this case, the only way to review this case is with a little bit of wine. So
no one's gonna believe I could understand DNA. I can't even get any of this stuff to work.
Yeah. So if we can get your earbuds in, that'll prevent me from coming out of your speakers and right back into your microphone.
Okay.
That's the feedback they're talking about.
Okay.
All right. Let's see. Am I still echoing a little?
The live chat, so I can see what people are saying.
Okay, I can barely hear you now.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Better.
Okay, let me try to.
Okay, there we go. It's getting better.
Okay, here.
Oh, much better. There you go.
Okay. Oh, but you're very loud. I have to turn you down.
Uh-oh. Yeah, turn me down. I'm a loud sucker.
Well, that's good. That's because I have headphones on. But now
I also project. So
well,
I talk to my mic like it's 10 or 15 feet away. So,
Well, but I had the headphone. I had the volume without the headphones. Can you hear me now?
I can hear you just fine, actually, now. Yeah, you were really soft at first, but now I can hear you really well.
Okay, I'm trying.
All right, so let's see what's going on in the chat here. Hello, everybody. Hello, Julie. Hey there, T1. How's it going, buddy? Everybody's saying hi. So
Okay, I'm
So
trying
as
to.
it- go ahead.
I've just taught. Hi, everybody. Thanks for being here and being so patient. I'm trying one more time to sign in on the iPad.
Okay.
I'm very stubborn.
Yeah, that's okay. We can chat with the folks in the live chat here for a minute while you try that one more time. What she's trying to do, folks, is she is really, really trying to get the Hangout to work on her iPad right now because she knows that the iPad's camera will work. She's having trouble with her computer's camera right now. So she's taking one more stab at getting the iPad Hangout to work.
Okay.
So
Okay, something. Okay, I think I might be.
okay. So
Okay,
as soon as you get it open, you can get a list of the Hangouts. You're going to go to the one for Adrian.
This kind of looks good. I see the cozy wrecking. Oh, Adrian. Oh, okay.
No, you see all that stuff. Yeah, you should be able to see Adrian's big idea.
Would like to. Oh, access camera. Oh, joy. Oh, this could be cool. Okay. Allow. Access microphone. Okay. But. Okay. Okay.
Hold on. Looks like I'm waiting for your other one to appear here. There it is. Hey, there you are. So now you can go into the Hangout on your computer and you can hang it up.
Okay.
Go to the phone. There's a little red phone, and you can hit that to hang up the call on your computer. That way you don't have two of them going.
Okay.
Hey, guys, we got her. You guys get to see what Scooby looks like.
That's reflective. Okay.
Oh, but those things are echoing, so you definitely got to get them. You got to get the first one shut down on your computer.
Yeah. Okay. Oh, wait, no.
Isn't technology fun, folks? There you go.
Okay. Now I can turn. You just Scooby, come back here. Scooby,
yeah, let's see Scooby.
Scooby has his Christmas sweat. Scooby. Scooby put his Christmas sweater on.
Right on.
He was sitting here. Okay. Is this? I don't know about this level here, but let's just. I'll fix that later. At least we can just get started.
You can adjust it as we go.
Okay, but you can sort of see who I am. See, I put Christmas lights on my couch here.
Yeah, there we go. Very festive.
Here,
Scooby looks like he's wearing a sweater over there. Or is it
he's got a Christmas sweater on. Let me try a different platform. Here, well, that's sort of better. I don't know. Oh, you can kind of see me.
I think that's fine. Catches your head and shoulders and catches your image. So
okay.
It's not like he's cutting off your head or anything. So.
Okay. This is the Scooby This is the Scooby couch where we supposed to. So Scooby was right here, but now he left. So he'll come back for the head up. Okay, now I want to go on YouTube so I can watch the live chat.
Okay, there you go.
I'm getting very sophisticated. Are people watching us?
They're all pretty happy about it. They're pretty stoked that you're now appearing on screen.
Very embarrassing. Okay, I don't even know. I have my.
They're all saying yay.
Okay, live now. Okay.
So, all right, everybody. So we actually even get to see Scooby today. It's a good thing she took that one more try at getting the iPad to work.
But it worked. Okay. I thought people would feel better to know that I really am a human being.
There you go. Yes, absolutely.
And thank you all for being so patient. This has totally on me, not Eric, but I really wanted to get the camera going. And because I was going so frustrated, I did pour the glass of wine.
Oh, there you go.
Cheers.
No worries, Allie. You're just in time. We just got her on camera. We're basically just getting ready to go here, so you're just in time.
I'm sitting on the Scooby couch, live for the Scooby couch, which I decorated with Christmas lights. So
Here we go. Festive
Okay.
holiday spirit still. So everybody's pretty happy here. So I think we can move into
wow, there is delay. This is so funny. I'm like behind on the
yes.
YouTube.
The Hangout is going to be different than the YouTube window. Yeah, definitely.
Wow. Oh, so that way, if I cuss or something, you can like block it out.
Well, I don't have anything like that.
Scooby's the one who cusses. I don't do that.
Scooby's the one who cusses.
He's got a bad mouth. Scooby,
Yep,
come back.
that's the kind of stuff I'm telling you about, folks. That's funny when you follow her on Twitter. Scooby
Yeah.
speak.
Yeah, well, that was his Twitter account that I took over. Seriously. So I'll just start with one question that I saw that was added. Somebody wrote, I lost my car keys and I've looked for them 5 or 6 times. Can you help me find them? And I will actually answer that because no, I can't. But I actually have been working on that with Scooby the dog. Now, because I thought I sometimes I can be one to lose my car keys on the phone. So I thought I could train him to find my keys, which you can do. You have to scent them, but he can only find my keys. So you basically scent your keys with like vanilla or a specific scent. And then you can teach him. I'm still learning where I look too on this.
Uh-oh. Uh-oh. Did the iPad freeze up? $10 says her iPad just rebooted. Or she forgot to plug it into power and Hangouts drain the battery on it because Hangouts will do that. Hangouts is crazy, crazy power drain on your battery, by the way, for those of you who don't know. I'm sure she'll be back in a second. Darn technical difficulties. I know we've lost Travis that way a couple times where his phone or whatever just dropped out and he suddenly just froze up in the chat. So we'll have to see. I'm sure she's getting it worked out at the moment here. We'll see her in a minute. Taken by a ghost? Uh-oh. Ruh-roh. Yeah, well, you were watching Hangouts. Yeah, it's crazy. It's a crazy power drain on your battery. And if you're not on your Wi-Fi, it'll go through your data pretty quickly too. So 2 things to be mindful of. You know, I love everybody in the wrecking crew, and I want everybody to be a part of it. But
Okay. Oh, I lost
don't
you.
go to the
Are you
poorhouse on your way there.
What
And
happened?
Scooby's back. Hello, Scoobs.
Sorry about that. I don't know what happened. It said I got disconnected.
It just said you got. Oh, I figured maybe it ran out of power or something. But we've had that happen with Travis before, where he didn't plug it into power and it ran out of power in mid conversation. It was.
Yeah. Okay. Scooby says hi.
All right. Cool. Oh, here, while he's there, hold on. Let me lock that in for everybody.
So there he's got his Christmas sweater on.
Oh, check him out. Oh, yeah, there you go.
Oh, there we go.
Whoops.
There's Scooby.
What's up, Scooby? What's up, buddy?
On the Christmas sweater. This is his festive holiday sweater. Oh.
He's a good-looking pup.
Well, anyway. I mean, he's really the brains behind this.
Oh, is he? I'm sure he is, right? No, I think you've got some interesting opinions on this case that other people are interested in hearing, for sure. So let's see what they say about Scoobs here. He is gorge, as in gorgeous. Kaylee says, "Aw." So everybody loves Scooby. All right, so let's move on to the questions.
Okay, so how do you want to do this? Do you want to read the questions to me, or
I can just read them to you. I think that'll probably make it easy. So, first one is from T1, part of the Wrecking Crew.
T-Bone, my buddy.
Can the state's DNA results be tested in any way for true source and comparison? Example, can the magic bullet results be tested and compared to results found on TH personal items or on Teresa's personal items?
Okay, so what he is asking, I'm going to paraphrase this to make sure I have the question right.
Right.
He wants to know if the state could use basically something from Teresa to compare some of the other test results to.
I think what he's getting at is he wants to figure out what, if it's possible to tell where the DNA on the bullet came from, like from what particular source possibly, if they were to try to match it up against, say, her vibrator or her hairbrush or her toothbrush.
Okay, I see. Okay, so is it possible if
but they used it all up, right?
If there was indeed DNA from Teresa on the bullet, could you tell what source it came from?
Right.
It's possible, but whether a crime lab would be able to do that kind of a test, I'm not sure. So the way that they do that now is they do something called, if they have the DNA, they have to, it's a little bit more of a sophisticated process. They actually would transcribe the DNA and do something called reverse transcription and basically see what the DNA codes for.
Oh, for like what part of the body or whatever?
Right. And then they could, by looking at certain markers, they could see if it would code for like a cervical cell or a
right. Or like a bladder cell or a blood cell.
Or yeah, maybe not that specific, but a certain kind of cell. So technically, scientifically, it's possible,
right.
But then there's also but it would be difficult and not something a crime lab would do.
Probably, and it sounds like what you're suggesting might be also not cost effective. Like it might cost some money to do that testing. Also,
correct.
Yeah,
correct. And it might not be. They might not have even the quality of the DNA. To do something like that, also, then you would need like the whole genome. I mean, the reason this STR testing, and again, maybe sometime in the future because we've been talking in Adrian's chat room about all kinds of plans, Eric, we have like to do tutorials, because I know a lot of people here, and that's why this is good to do these, because a lot of people here have educated themselves a lot and do know a lot, but I don't know, like when I talk about STR testing, I don't know if people, some people probably know what.
I think some people will and some people won't. I see what you mean.
Sometimes even if it's really good to go back and really just kind of go back to square one and explain some of these things.
Yeah.
So that, because my goal for all of you guys is not to tell you things, but I see myself more as a teacher, to teach you about these things so that you can be analysts yourself and kind of think about things, not just for this case, but for other cases too, for the future. In
fact, Denise, my moderator, Denise, if you could pull those 2 videos that Scooby shared in the Adrian chat, if you could pull those out and post those in the live chat for people to review after this, or actually if you could post them at the end of the chat, I guess, or at the end of the video for people to go review those 2 videos. That's the kind of thing that Scooby was referring to help everybody get more of a background and a better understanding of DNA as her and I move forward in the future here, getting into more and more advanced DNA topics. So if you could grab those, I know Denise knows where they are, so I know she can grab them real easy.
Yes, thank you.
And put those up at the end of the video.
For those who don't know what he's talking about, I did put in the chat some homework.
Homework.
There are, just to not reinvent the wheel, there are two videos. They're TED Talks, so they're about 15 minutes long. They're not that long, but they're excellent. And they are by two scientists who I really respect, and they do a great job. They have visuals, so you can see a lot. They touch on some of the issues we were talking about the last time I was here, and they do it so well. It's kind of like, just why reinvent the wheel? So for any of you that are interested, those would be great videos to watch. And as they say in their videos, you will become a DNA expert by just really worth
He
your
does
time.
say that at the beginning. I was watching. Yeah, he does.
Did you get a chance to see those? I know.
I was watching the first one. I watched all of the first one and then got stuck doing something else. And it ended up going to another video about DNA that was playing for like 20 minutes. It was some guy who was really getting down in the weeds. I don't know how much of that I picked up, but but I did watch the first one. Yeah, that 15-minute one. That was really easy to understand, the way he was laying it out, the way that he was explaining to people, look, here's how this DNA gets on things. It's important how you analyze this. You know, if I pick this up and go commit the act, okay, then my DNA profile's on it. But what if I say, before I go commit the act, hand it to you, and then hand it also to you, and then I take it back, and then I go commit the act? Well, now we have 3 people's DNA on there. And he talks about the whole statistics of things. Very interesting stuff. So I will advise people to click those links at the end of this session. And go check those out. That's Scooby's homework, and keep your eyes out, because Scooby may have more homework in the future.
I will, yeah. This is a Scooby school. And somebody just said, who actually brought this up, because I don't want to jump off too much, or I'll stay. Should I stay away from the chat right now? I'll stay away from the chat.
If you want to address Allie's question, go ahead.
Oh, I didn't see
what you're
that.
talking about the 7 Loki. Well, whichever one you want. Go ahead.
Oh, does Scooby think fingerprints are old science?
Oh.
Well, there's a lot of controversy right now about fingerprints, and I'm not an expert in this area, but yes, there is the American Academy of Science did a big report back in 2009 looking at all of the forensic science that has been used. And they have found problems with a lot of it, in that it's not very, just as in one of the videos, the guy says about the DNA, it would be nice if it was the more scientific, that there's not. And one of the areas that they found a lot of problems with are things that they call pattern analysis, and fingerprints belonging to that category, meaning that they might not be so, I guess, I mean, obviously they're still used all the time, I believe, in law enforcement. I'm not an expert, but
yeah, I think when you have enough of a print, it's pretty identifiable piece of evidence. I mean,
but I guess I don't know as much about that area. However, there is suggestion that perhaps they are not as
accurate as been suggested,
or as possible. Or I think what's happened in forensic science I use loosely, and I'm trying not to be too hard on them, but the point is not to necessarily criticize them, but it needs to become more scientific. In the past, it was more anecdotal, but it needs to become more scientific, and it needs to become more based in science, not like this bite mark analysis. Well, now that has been shown to be basically, I won't use the word Scooby would, but just
we'll just say erroneous.
The problem is more that and then you get these experts. The problem that I see is that people, they just can't be honest. Like in science, you might say, well, this fingerprint looks like it could match, it could be this person.
Right.
But I can't say 100%.
Right.
But no one's going to hire an expert to say that. So
Right.
what they do, what I see that they do is they, how can I say, which is what I think Leisenberg, or I should be professional, Dr. Eisenberg here did,
Right.
was exaggerate. In other words, you could say,
Uh-oh. I think Scooby's having trouble with their Wi-Fi. I'm sure her call got disconnected. She'll be back in just a second. That's what I was going to say, actually, what Tony Fertini was saying. There's no more DNA from the bullet to do anything with, to try to even test against anything. That was something that occurred to me as well.
right, I was going to comment
And
on that.
there
And
you
he
go.
also brought up, and he actually, Tony, I'll get to his question because he did ask a very good question and about that, about the contamination.
Okay.
Somebody asked, I guess I'm kind of skipping around, but somebody asked how she did tested the bullet. Did she dunk it in water? Well, there's two ways. The first step when you're doing DNA analysis is that you have to extract the DNA out of the cells.
Mm-hmm.
And so there's, when you have a bigger sample, like a swab or a piece of fabric with blood in it, you can cut out a little bit of your sample and then dump that in a test tube. And the test tube
Right.
contains buffer type solution, which will basically break up, lyse the cell membranes that allow the DNA to come out and be extracted.
Right.
But when you have a very tiny, teeny sample like this bullet fragment was, which you could not even see, there was nothing to swab. So
Right.
this is very fishy to me. Of course, I can, that this is my personal opinion, I'll say, but on this bullet that went through a body, purportedly,
Right.
there was no visible blood, gook,
Nothing like that, right?
material that they could see. So, you know, if there
Hey,
was,
this bullet's truly magic indeed, because it's also repelled every bit of concrete dust that was created when they jackhammered the crack in the garage. So let's just note that this bullet is magical indeed. There we go.
I call it the magic bullet. So what, and it's also a fragment of the bullet. So what Sherry did was she had her test tube and she just dunked the whole thing in, which is what you would do because she probably had, if you can't see something like blood or fluid or anything, then you know you're dealing with a very small amount of material.
Right.
And so in order to get as much material as possible, I mean, she did what would make sense. You would dunk the whole thing and then hopefully all of your DNA would wash off into the
Right.
buffer.
Right.
So now, what I was told was that, but that there is, so then she, from that extracted DNA, there actually is, so that what's not left is the original sample. So that's gone. I mean, there's no original sample to take DNA off.
Right.
But there
It's
is
used it up.
some
Right.
saved DNA from that original extraction. The problem is that it's contaminated. And that's why I'm assuming the, because you don't know, the fact that Sherry Culhane's profile was amplified. And this is where maybe when we go back and talk about how these tests are done. So the first step is to extract. And then you're going to take the DNA and you're going to amplify it. You're going to make
Copies of what's there.
a million copies. So
Right.
the fact that Sherry Culhane's profile was amplified meant that it got in.
Right.
It got in before the PCR step.
Right.
So purportedly, according to her, she was talking, which again, somebody asked me about my credentials, and I don't want to talk a lot about myself, but no, I'm not a forensic scientist. I have a lot of more schooling than I have. I have a very eclectic background. I have 1 degree in molecular biology, but I have actually I started life as so I don't want to go into that, but yes, I have a lot of background in science and
in the sciences that we're dealing with here, but not.
Yeah.
She hasn't actually worked for a crime lab, folks. Okay,
But no.
there we go. Moving on.
Crime lab is a different. However, I have done a lot of research and learned a lot about
Yes.
the forensics world. And holy hot dogs, as Scooby would say, it has been it's been a learning experience because it's. I won't go into that now, but it's really there is a need for a lot of improvement. I thought a crime lab would be like a medical lab. I mean, as far
Right.
as
Right.
standard
Or clinical.
GC.
Right.
But no. So, for instance, with this, just the fact that Sherry Culhane, now I heard somebody say that's not true. You're doing probably the most important case of your lifetime. This very important in the state of Wisconsin murder trial. It's not just any murder trial. I mean, this is probably the biggest case.
They spent the most money investigating the Teresa Halbach case than they had previously to date.
And you are examining a piece of evidence that you're going to use up completely because you're going to take that fragment and put it in a test tube and that you're going to have a one shot. And that is the time you choose to be training people?
Yeah.
I mean, that judgment call alone, makes my head spin. It makes me wonder about the what goes on there.
Yeah.
And I know so because
the defense couldn't be there, but some random group of students could be. It's like, come on.
Right.
Come on.
And when to be contamination, and that's why I really hope people watch that Greg, I can never pronounce his last name, Greg H, I'll call him, video, and he's very active in the Innocence Project, as he'll talk about, but because he talks about contamination and how critical contamination is. And once again, now you're working on this very important, valuable piece of evidence, and you're going to where nobody should even be in the room.
Right.
Nobody. Or no other piece of evidence, and you're letting other people in the room. I mean, just the way that whole thing was done was horrific. So Tony or whoever asked that question, oh my God, I'm with you. Yeah, that should have been thrown out,
right?
Just because of the contamination. And I said this in the chat, I want people to think another thing on the video, which I don't have here that you could see, is these test tubes that are used are really tiny when we talk about test tubes. I mean,
they're really,
yeah,
they're like little cone-shaped little things, right?
Yeah, we're working with microliters of fluid, and they put them in a rack. So usually you have a rack of, maybe depending on what you're doing, 20 to 100 test tubes.
Right.
And often people, when they're doing the controls, and you're pipetting everything into the tubes one after another. So if Sherry was talking over all that, because so many of the guilters, they all tell me that, of course, that they all tell me that I'm stupid. I don't know what I'm talking about. And people can make that judgment for themselves. That's fine.
Some of them are starting to learn their manners. But anyway.
But the problem is, well, that's what I tell them. Nobody has to listen. Nobody has to listen to me. Like I said, my only goal has been to educate, to share, because I have a background, just because like Travis has a background in the law, and he can help me understand the law, is to help other people understand things, not what to believe, but understand some things, so that because.
Okay. And so one question here from the chat, and this is the last question we're taking from the chat. Okay, guys, seriously, last one. Okay, this is it until the end. Okay, so if don't get your feelings hurt if I ignore it after this. Sorry.
And we'll
so the question is,
if there's the interest, we'll do more videos too.
Well, yeah, and obviously,
There's
and
a
I
lot-
said there will be a question. We'll take a handful of questions at the end. So this is gonna be the last one for now, so that we can move over to the submitted questions. But this person's asking, so how did the FL, the item FL, how was it entered into evidence if it makes no sense if it was a diluted sample? I'm not sure that's what we're saying here. It's when it's put into buffer, it's not necessarily diluted. Do you know what she's referring to there, Scoobs?
Maybe no, not exactly.
Okay.
Is that one of the questions from the?
That's the question that Allie was asking me. So tell you what, Allie and L Fallon, rephrase that and save it for the end, because I'm not sure if I'm understanding it the way that it was asked.
Because if they are talking about putting it in the tube was diluted, no, that was the extraction process. So
Right.
that was how you have to get the DNA is inside of the cell. So you have to put it that in that tube is, and actually that occurs in a bigger test tube than the tiny
okay.
one, because you have to get the DNA out of the cells. So there's a buffer solution. And these kits are all, and actually that's another, there's so many places where contamination can occur. Sometimes pipettes are the little gizmos that,
Right, they put the, right.
use to get to, so you put a pipette in and then you put it over the test tube, but you shouldn't touch a tube. And like I said,
Oh, right.
just, a solution can get contaminated. Lots of things can. Contamination is a huge problem.
Right.
And so when there are, and when you have contamination, you have, like how Greg explains in that video when he put the Scrabble letters in.
Right.
Contamination basically makes a mixed sample.
Right.
And so.
And he was naming off like about 30 different names that he was able to create from those letters, from him and the prosecutor's name. Yeah.
And so it's the same thing, because when you put more than one person's DNA into a sample, you can't tell like who is who. You don't get out like person A and person B. You just have now all these numbers. You might have like 12, 13, 14, and 15, or 12, 13, and 15 if people have the same things. But you don't know who is who. That might not make sense to people right now.
Right. No, I think people will understand that, like I'm understanding it. When they go after this and watch that TED Talk video, they'll see, I think, what you mean by that.
Right.
Because if you're jumbling everything up and then you're just pulling pieces out, you don't really know exactly how all the pieces go back together.
It's subject to interpretation.
Right. There you go.
And it can be interpreted. We know that things can be interpreted sometimes how we want to interpret them.
Right. Okay. So let's move on to some of these. Another one of the pre-asked questions. This one is from Linda K. Breer. I would like to know, what are the sources you use to make a DNA profile when there is none to start with, such as Teresa Halbach? Okay. I guess they're saying to generate her DNA profile when she was dead, and they didn't have anything of her. I guess I guess she's asking about things like the pap smear and stuff, I would imagine.
Right. You could use basically anything from that person, especially if they're recently deceased. There would be a lot of stuff, a toothbrush, anything.
A hairbrush with a follicle, right?
Hairbrushes. But I'm assuming, and because I noticed in another case, the Christine Rudy case that I looked into in Wisconsin, they also use the pap smear as a standard. That's called a standard, and that is a known sample from the, in this case, victim who is deceased, or it would be a suspect. If a suspect is alive, obviously, or possibly, usually, so you can always get DNA from them, from their body.
Right.
But I'm assuming that in these court cases, they're using the pap smear because it's like an official medically preserved piece of tissue or cell, as opposed to saying, so the defense can't argue, oh, well, you said that was Teresa's toothbrush, but it really wasn't. It
removes the, okay, I see what you mean. It removes the the ability that the defense could argue that there was monkey business because it's
Right.
clearly something that was medically labeled, and the chain of custody on it's going to be pretty solid.
Right, but if it was just a missing persons case where that's why this is so interesting, because you have the missing person issue entwined with this legal case. Basically, they're using the missing person to try to convict someone of murder. If it was like a straight missing persons case, they usually would just take a sample from the family, because the
Right.
family's not going to, the family wants to find their loved one. So
Sure.
they're not going to be giving them something that's not from their loved one. Now,
Right.
I don't have it because, again, I'm just I don't want to go too much off onto myself, but I was very much into this case the first year after MAM, and I did a lot of research, and I have a lot of stuff, and I have a lot of stuff on Reddit, but that I don't have access to right now, but I will get because of my old. Anyway, that's a long story. But I actually won, and I did I have a lot of friends on Reddit who became my who I trained to be DNA experts. Well, I won't say just me, but because that could be a drinking game. How many times I say, I'm trying not to.
Yeah, possibly.
So,
I've imagined people sitting around playing that game, watching me a couple times actually. So,
but we looked into that. Interestingly, Pap smears are not the greatest source of profiles. In fact, they often, and there is a post on Reddit, although Reddit, they changed. I went to look up so I could maybe link some of my writings on Reddit, because I wrote a lot on
you
Reddit.
may have been archived.
I have to get a new password. They said I don't know what happened to me, but either. There is a good post about that, because Pap smears have been shown to not always produce the best profiles, and they're using these as standards. And then, of course, there's the issue that none of us know about, because we don't know if Sherry didn't get a good standard. So for a standard, which is what you're going to use as your baseline that you're going to compare everything against, you want a really good,
clean profile, sample,
a solid profile. And when I talk about solid, I made because I was sleep deprived the last time I talked, I called the graphs electroencephalograms. Those are EEGs. I meant the electropherograms. Those are the graphs that come out from the analysis, and that's what the technicians now use to interpret, to make their judgments about what alleles are there. So when I say how strong a test is, it would be very interesting to see that. And that's what we call the raw data. And that's what I don't have access to. Now, Travis alluded to the fact, is Travis here? Alluded to the fact that it was possible to get that, but I don't know that it is. And again, this could be a talk I try not to go off on tangents. This would be another talk I would love to do, because I see a lot of similarities between this case and the Amanda Knox case. And the way that they basically exonerated Amanda Knox was to go in and look at the raw data. And you can see, and that shows you every run of DNA that they tested.
Right.
Because, and this could be the case here, 60%, or in that case, maybe 70%, I don't remember the exact number, but a huge amount of the data was withheld by the prosecution. In other words, what you're seeing in Sherry's lab reports is what they want you to see. You're not necessarily seeing, like you'll notice, and we'll get to this because I want to bring it up, because I think that one of the questions might allude to it. She had no problem with that 7 loci profile to identify Teresa, yet there are a couple of other profiles that would be very interesting to see, where she says, they're not reported because they weren't good enough, or they were only partial profiles.
Right.
Well,
like the ones on the rear tailgate, for instance. I would love to know what alleles were popping out of her on her inconclusive test. I would love to know what alleles were popping out.
Right. So we don't get to see. We don't get to see those, what those were. Well, nor did they take any DNA samples from anybody else, anybody interesting. But that data is somewhere, or should be somewhere, in their logs.
I agree. It should be. All right, let's go on to the next.
Access to it.
All right, let's move on to the next question here. T1 again asking, what substance or material is the hardest to test for a DNA profile?
The substance in this, the important substance in this case, burnt
remains.
Material. Burnt remains. Much worse than they can find people that have been laying in water for weeks and bloated or buried or frozen, and that's been burnt by fire. In fact, and I think I'm sorry, I can't remember your name offhand, but there's someone who obviously did his research, because he said that the research shows, which is it does, it's basically impossible to get DNA from burnt remains this badly, remains that are burnt this badly.
And the heat has destroyed any cellular matter.
Is very sensitive to heat. The heat degrades the DNA, and when you're burning something, you're burning away all of the organic material, which is the DNA. So you're actually destroying it. So
okay. All right, makes sense. Next one is from Spicy Melody. Does the lack of DNA on evidence concern you? For instance, lack of TH DNA or Teresa's DNA on the key. That bothers me a lot. I would add on to that. Do you buy into Culhane's theory about how masking, I guess? Do you buy into that whole deal?
About the key?
Yeah, the key, yeah.
Talk about the key. Well, first of all, yeah. Well, I mean, I guess it's so ridiculous. I don't even bother getting into it as far as that. And this is why I don't even know how this case, I honestly don't even know how this case got into the court or through the court or how they got found guilty, because to have the crime. What do you want, baby? What do you want? We're on TV now. To have the crime go down the way they said it did, with absolutely no DNA, is basically impossible. Yet they find DNA in these very obscure situations. That's
none of Teresa's DNA on any handcuff anywhere in there. None of Teresa's DNA anywhere that would suggest a crime had actually taken place. But somehow we have an abundance of Stephen's DNA on this key and none of Teresa's, for a key that she supposedly owned. I mean,
Now, Jerry Buting actually, I guess, unfortunately, the jury or nobody was really interested in science. Cheers.
Cheers.
This question calls for a little wine. Jerry Buting actually introduced a little science. See, this is also the problem with forensics. There's not a lot of research, so I can't go back. So I can't go back and say, well, here's a journal article that shows they tested 15 keys, and on these 15 keys you found samples of the two people that touched them.
Right.
Well, they didn't have that, but Jerry Buting had an article that he did introduce in the trial that was about as close as you could get. They had different items. One of them, I just remember because it was memorable, was a piece of a sausage used in a sexual assault.
Wow. Yeah, we got it.
Who knows?
Yeah.
Scary things occur in the criminal world.
Yes.
Anyway, they had various items that had been touched by two people, had been touched by a victim and then touched by a person committed a crime. I don't believe one of them was actually a key, but a couple of them were metal items. And in all cases, you had DNA from both parties on them. So that was
no masking.
Right. So
it's a Sherry Culhane fantasy.
Well, and I've got into that discussion with someone who made a video about that, and he kind of misinterpreted something. He said, well, Stephen Avery's DNA is so powerful or something that it overpowered Teresa's DNA. And that was a theory that someone argued with me about, but that would be very unusual. And then of course, with what Zellner now then later on showed us, you know what I was expecting, this is really interesting. What Zellner, you know, is just, she's done more, she is just genius. She's done more science than the forensics world has done, or because I thought right away, well, what I thought would happen with the hood latch, if it was real, and the key and the bullet, is that they would have, which is what happened in the Amanda Knox case. They tried to do, they tried to use too little DNA, which is a special low copy number. There's a special, they tried to do something called low copy number DNA analysis. And that requires a specialty lab and special techniques. And so I expected to see the key because would have, and that hood latch to have just like too little DNA on them, because especially the bullet, because when you can't see, a general, not always, but a general rule of thumb is if your sample is something that you can't see, like a blood, you know, like you can't see the blood, or you can't see, you know, the semen stain, or you're sampling something that you can't visually see, odds that you have what are called low copy number or number DNA are high. So that means you're dealing with such a small amount of cells that you can't see it, that you're going to have to be, now contamination is even more of an issue. That's what I expected. But no, instead it was the opposite. There was way too much DNA on the key and the hood latch. And so, which, yes, I think is very telling. And
I think so.
You know what's really sad?
It's going to be interesting to find out if there's even any of Steven's DNA on the hood prop or on the battery cables or any of those other places. It's going to be interesting to see if it even shows up in those places, because if it doesn't show up in those places, yet shows up with 1.9 nanograms in one place, kind of like a red flag, you know?
Well, right, and that's a huge, and that's another good point, that there's none of his DNA in obvious places, like on a, normally with this touch DNA, you're going to have more where you have sustained pressure. So if I just pick up this glass now, you know, my finger's a little, you know, there's a little oil in there. So if somebody did a swab of this right now, they'd probably get a good DNA profile on me. If I wipe this off, but if I sat this outside for a week and somebody swabbed this, I don't think they'd get S off of that.
Okay.
So touch DNA, you know, it wouldn't stick. It just doesn't have the staying power.
Right.
So now you think, okay, well, Stephen, a hood latch, I suppose you do a little pressure there, but also other people, I believe, were opening that hood.
But as you're lifting the hood, you're going to be putting pressure, you know, lifting that hood, getting the hood prop and getting it into place. You're going to be, you know, kind of putting your
steering wheel, but there's no DNA on the steering wheel where you're holding on with your hand, with your bloody hand,
or the gear shifter, right?
And then, or the doors, or the door handle, or the shifter thing.
Right.
You know, there's nothing on any of those more obvious places yet in this one obscure place. And then they can't see anything, but Fassbender, who did the swab? I don't know who actually did the swab. I think Fassbender delivered it, but it was a law enforcement person.
It was,
not even
I was
a
just looking at
DNA
that
tech who did the swabbing of the RAV, of the hood latch.
Right.
They knew exactly where to swab because you couldn't see anything. There was nothing to see, but they knew exactly where to swab to get this huge amount of DNA. Now, come on.
I know. Yeah.
It's
like, it's ridiculous.
You don't have to have a degree in molecular biology. Much of this is just common sense.
I mean, wouldn't they have lit the entire RAV4 up with luminol in the first place when they first found it to determine if there was any, you know, DNA? I would think they would have, but I don't know. Maybe not. just because it's such an important piece. But I don't know. Anyways, all right, moving on. Tony Frattini is asking, forensic studies have shown that it is extremely difficult to extract DNA, genomic and mtDNA from burnt bones. The remaining DNA is often heavily fragmented and a poor template for PCR amplification. How many amplified markers will be required to be definitive that the cremains belong to TH and not to some other burnt victim? Would Casey's experts test every bone or just the select few? So I would say they're only going to test the select 9 bones, I think, or 9 different things that they're asking for. And I think that's kind of asking how the new quick DNA test method works, which I don't know how much you've been able to find out about that yet.
Well, the quick, yeah, we'll talk about that more because next time. But the quick DNA is sort of a broad term, and that's being used a lot now. What the quick DNA testing does, and one positive thing, well, it could be positive, or in the most part is positive, is it takes away the technician analyzing those graphs, so the computer's going to do it. So it takes that human component out of it. So the quick DNA, but the quick DNA is, so that's kind of like a general term. And now all these different companies, like if you do a search for quick DNA, you'll see all of these different companies have their own brand, if you will.
Right.
So the Andy, which is a company, us, but Dr. Selvin, and I don't want to misspeak because I don't know if it was just him or he and some other people. They have a company, and the difficulty in getting information, although I'm going to try to talk to him, we'll see. But
that'd be cool.
But and yeah, maybe we can even get him. I don't know if we'll get him on.
Well, maybe.
But because so his test is proprietary. So for instance, all these different companies make their own tests, so they don't necessarily publish the specific details. Like he, is using 27 loci, and basically, my question, and I don't know the answer right now, is what is special about his test that will allow it to get results for bones that are burned this badly? Because right now, the quick DNA, it's being used for by, I don't know if people know what the deal is with the quick DNA tests are. It allows a law enforcement, and it's used mainly by law enforcement for suspects. So it allows them to take a buccal swab, a cheek swab, and put it into this little machine. It looks kind of like a printer, and it will, within 2 hours, spit out a profile, and it will send it to the database and match to see if that person is in the database. So it will. So but the law enforcement officers aren't using it to do like crime scene evidence and stuff right now. They're just using it's just approved by the FBI for that purpose. So Dr. Selvin, he kind of seems like, well, first of all, he's a very, very well-educated man, definitely. And his passion was, he actually, you guys should look him up on Facebook. Richard Selvin, he has a Facebook page. I don't think it's necessarily him because it says this page represents him. So it's probably somebody, these people have like other people. It's not like me. They have like people who do these things.
Right.
Like they have someone to do all their tech for them.
Right.
So they don't have to be
Trust me. Sometimes I wish I had a person like that.
Yeah, so they don't have to be like me trying to. I'm like low level. I have to do my own hangout. But anyway, his passion was this is what he says. His passion was for rape victims, for instance. Apparently, 1 in 5 women are raped, which is scary. However, he used the numbers. There's not that many rapists as there are women raped, because most rapists are doing are doing multiple rapes.
Right.
So in other words, they're serial rapists. So if you
Right.
could catch the guy, the sooner you could catch the rapist, you can stop other women from being
Right.
raped. So that's one of the selling points that he uses for his quick DNA test is that,
Okay.
if you could, identify, a rapist, while he's in jail, before he gets out on bond or something.
Right.
You could maybe-
Absolutely. So I think we'll put a pin in that question, I guess, for now until we can research a little bit more into the
Right.
Andy
But
method.
it's the same type of test as an STR testing, but like I said, what I'm curious about is what, and the new testing is more sophisticated. I'm thinking he might, I don't know, but he might do something. I mean, obviously those samples from like the forest fires were
Mhm.
probably done in his lab by some, they were probably given special treatment. What can I,
Yeah. Okay. Sure.
they weren't just done the same way like the
Mhm.
law enforcement guy doing the buccal swab. And
Right.
so
Right. Yeah.
there
But
might
yeah, a
be,
lot more a lot more TLC involved. Right.
right. And that would be the case here, I would assume.
Certainly. Okay, so let's move on to Anthony Mahan. How come Stephen Avery's DNA was on the RAV4 key, but suspiciously Teresa's was not, which I think we sort of covered already. Also, Teresa's throat was meant to have been cut in the bedroom, yet no traces of Teresa's blood is found anywhere on Stephen's property. If you can answer these two questions, you're a better person than I. So that's, I guess, what he's asking is number one, we were talking about how why only would we find Stephen's DNA on the car key and none of Teresa's, which I think we talked about. Then he's asking about if they were cutting her throat and stabbing her, and then how can there be no trace of that in the trailer or anywhere on the property and everything. So, which I think are two good points.
Yeah, well, and I think that's why. So I'm experimenting with my. Oh, just ignore me. Ignore the man behind the curtain. It doesn't matter. Oh no, that's worse. Okay, never mind. I was trying to. Okay. Well, you guys don't need to see me. Who cares? Okay. In fact, maybe it's better if you don't. But well, yeah, it's just ridiculous. Like I said, I don't even entertain that. I mean, what can you say? It makes.
Yeah.
It
I
makes,
mean, it's just the facts in this case that just don't make any sense. It's absolutely,
which is why. Oh, now I'm too low. I don't believe. I mean, I just don't believe that story happened. I don't think anybody believes. I mean, does anybody believe it? It's too bad nobody.
There you go.
Yeah, that I'll just say that. That's good.
That looks good.
Now, yeah, it's just ridiculous. It's not
Right.
even. No, but I don't think anybody believes that story. Unfortunately, I guess the jury did.
Yeah, or something.
Well, the jury didn't, but
then again, they didn't convict on mutilation. So.
Well, and that was with this case. So much of it was tried in the media. That story, in fact, I don't think that story was even presented in the trial, was it? Some of you, you people that are really good about the documents can maybe help me out with that. If that story was told during Stephen Avery's trial about, I don't even think they really went into how the crime was committed.
I think he stayed away from it and basically only addressed it really in his Kratz only came out with his theory of what happened in his closing argument. I do remember that was part of his strategy.
Right, because if he brought it up during the trial, I mean, it obviously would be easy to refute it, because there's no way that crime could have took place the way that they said it did, and there would be no evidence.
Yeah. It's basically big full court press to put a snow job on the jury in his final argument and hope that they wouldn't realize it in time.
But the problem was, he made that very emotional press conference, and everybody believed, and belief is a powerful thing. And even though they say they got a jury that had no idea about this case, that probably was pretty impossible in this area. I mean, I think, I don't know, but I think that jury should have been, I mean, that case should have not been tried in anywhere near that area. I mean, I think either Milwaukee County, ideally, where you have a whole different type of population, where people would be, hell yes, the police would plant evidence, excuse me, but because, you know, it's a big city and it's like we are familiar with police corruption here.
Right,
You know, as opposed to there, where that guy was the whole thing, oh, our fine police officers would never do it. And the police have a lot of power up there. They have a lot of power over those people. So we're gonna, okay.
It's like
and
John Frack says in his book that, you know, becoming a law enforcement official there in areas like Manitowoc and those rural type of areas, it sets you above kind of it, you know.
They wouldn't, I mean, they stuff in the big, I live in the big city of Wisconsin, and it's more like, you know, a little Chicago, they call it. But I mean, I'm sure, you know, stuff happens here, but there's other people that are watching, you know, you have, so it's a little harder to get away with, you know, there's not, you know, just one DA, you know, there's more. It's harder for, it would be a lot harder for something like this to happen. And you have a sophisticated, I don't mean to, this as an insult to anybody, but you would have a sophisticated, educated jury pool to draw from. Not that they would pick from them.
Oh, right. I see what you mean.
They would never want on a jury, but you know.
Right. So, well, to move on to the next one, I think then is Angie Norton says, with respect to the damaged flesh found on one of the bones, when determining DNA from it, do scientists take one sample or do they take several and run DNA profiles? Is it possible or standard for multiple samples to be taken and combine the loci markers to get a more complete profile? Do you understand what they're asking?
Kind of. I think she's saying, well, you know, would you take, like, I guess we'll just use Sherry's cutting of the flesh off the bone, which is what she said, you know, take like a bunch of different samples. Now, a scientist, if you were doing, you know, an experiment and looking at something, oh, sorry, I got to turn.
Yep.
Nobody is more important than this. I'm sorry.
Oh, okay. I was gonna say, I think she just got a call.
Yeah, sorry about it. Anyway, now I have to go back to my train of thought. So yes, what I see in the crime labs though now, first of all, there's the money issue, and then they are always in a hurry. When, according to Sherry's, in this case, according to Sherry's testimony, it sounded to me like she just took one sample, because she said, I cut a piece, I looked for a place where the tissue was close to the bone, where it would give me a good sample, and I cut it from there.
Right.
So now, I guess it depends on the lab, it depends on the time, it depends on...
Right.
But I think, unfortunately, in crime labs, in these crime labs, in these state crime labs, they're in a hurry. They don't have a lot of resources. They probably or it depends on, you know. Now, for instance, let's look at the RAV4, which right away I followed the thinking process behind this investigation. Well, how many swabs of purported Stephen Avery blood did they take from that car? Like 8 or 10 or something. And how many swabs of the purported victim's blood did they take?
Right. Just a couple.
Yeah. Now, what did that says to me? What was the priority? Identifying the missing person? Or
right, yeah.
identifying Stephen Avery.
Right, exactly. That would show that,
it just
yeah.
seemed very clear. And she did not even bother. They didn't wait until, now you would think, yes, they might order the pap smear, but they could have got like a toothbrush or something just to do because you're looking for a missing person, a person who you have blood in a car. They could be alive. She could have wandered off somewhere. I mean, we didn't know she was dead yet. I mean, theoretically.
Right.
But so you think,
Well, apparently Mike Halbach did. He was ready to start the grieving
exactly.
process. But
Which
anyway,
again,
sorry.
there's so much we can go off. We could talk all night because there's so much weirdness. Like I said, the more I
Right.
looked, I didn't know about this case when it was going on. I guess it was televised here, but I was working, so I didn't know anything about this case until somebody told me about the documentary, which I probably never would have watched. Except someone said, "Oh, it took place in Wisconsin." So I thought, "Oh, okay." So I watched it, and then I thought, "Wow!" And in a way, it sounds a little too dramatic, but it's kind of true. It's changed my life. Actually, because I knew nothing. I mean, fortunately, I've not had much dealings with the legal system, and I didn't know anything about these crime labs and how
Right.
how this worked and the legal system,
Right.
to this degree, and how many wrongful convictions there are. And like I said, it led me to, I happened to have time at the time. It just worked. That's, like I said, life is strange and interesting how it works out, but it got me.
Certainly.
I started just out of my own personal interest. I thought, well, I'm just going to look into this DNA research, and it just really has opened my eyes.
Right.
Kind of started me on a journey into becoming kind of maybe like you and a lot of people that I've met along the way. I became
Right.
really interested in.
I just think that maybe what this person was getting at was if you were to try to take multiple samples off that piece of flesh and like process them separately or whatever, would they possibly pop out with different alleles on multiple tests that maybe might not all show up on just one test, I guess.
Yeah, I don't think so. And they might do, I mean, ideally, if you don't get, so for instance, that profile would be considered inconclusive or just basically meaningless, because I guess the best way that I explain it is that in that test, there's 16, well, along with the sex marker, there's 16 loci that you should have results for. So
Right.
she got less than half of,
Okay.
so basically she got half of a profile. So while you can say, well, okay, that's half is positive, but then there's also a 50% possibility that the other half doesn't match. So
Right.
it's one way to look at it. You just don't, which is, like I said, most.
Right.
The problem with crime labs is that there are no standards right now.
Right.
They're monitored by the FBI that basically says each lab should have its own standards. And the lab's standards basically are, well, it's up to the discretion of who's ever in charge what you do. So there's not typically a partial. Right. So the word partial, we might be getting off into too much. Partial in the science world classically meant you have 2 full profiles and maybe they match everywhere except one loci they don't match. But your tests work. So these tests, they're all prefabricated kits. So if you have a decent sample, you should get results at every loci. If you don't, that means there's something wrong with your reagents or your tests, or there's something wrong with your sample. Right. So sometimes there's 1 or 2 missing, and that's usually what a partial profile is. And then they started using the word partial profile. Well, how low do you go? I've never seen anyone. And then people say, well, this is a identifying a dead person. And we can get into this. This may be a topic for another day, but what really identified her, but what was in court, that really was not. I mean, doubt could be used. What really identified her was the mitochondrial DNA,
Right.
which was using her. But again,
Right.
that was used in a press conference. So
Okay.
she was in the minds of the public. That was Teresa.
Right.
And also, I think people here know no bones were ever tested.
Right. So, next question is about bone. Are you able to get a good profile from ash? Or, sorry, or do you need to have bone with marrow? What is the source from bone that you would need to get a profile? So, like in this Andy test, which I guess maybe you haven't looked into Andy yet, maybe you might not be able to answer this yet, but
Oh yeah, okay.
what exactly are they testing on the bone that's been
Well,
burned?
yeah, I can answer that. So no, there wouldn't be any marrow, and I think somebody else has it in these bones because that's long burnt away.
Right.
And we have to remember when looking at these bones, we say bones just for sake because it's too long to say bone fragment every time. But
Right.
these are very tiny pieces. These aren't bones, really.
Right.
Think about a bone. These are tiny pieces, and I'll just tell you about just a quickie anatomy lesson. I started life as a PT, a physical therapist, and so I taught when I was going through school on my master's degree in molecular biology. I always taught anatomy and physiology, so that's kind of my thing. So bone, so I have,
Yeah.
it's kind of good to have an eclectic background I can speak to, but a lot of things. But bone is made of two materials. So there's the organic material, which DNA is, and then there's the inorganic material, silica and phosphates that kind of make up the hard structure of bone. So when you put a body in the crematorium, and it lays there, and this, your friend Ripper kind of showed with the llama bones, the same thing. And then you pull it out, so you heat it up, so you cook it. You've basically burned all the organic material, all of you pull that body out, it looks like a skeleton. Okay, because that's the inorganic material is still left. So you see white, what looked like white, it's like, that's why the placement of a crime scene can tell you a lot. So it looks like, and then they take it and they put it in a food processor. And some of them honestly use like the Cuisinart, or that fancy brand, and they grind it up into the ashes.
Oh.
So so people just don't burn to ashes. You have to grind that. But if you touched them, they'd sort of break apart. So, so if you just have ashes, but sometimes now there is a company, I actually read this, that offers testing for your urn. So sometimes, if you look at the ashes, that'll be like a chunk that's like a little more, didn't get pulverized quite enough. And maybe it has a little bit of organic material left. So there's a company that actually is advertising, they can test your urn. So if you have a little chunk in your urn, they can test your urn and see if it's like really grandma, it's not somebody.
Oh, wow.
So apparently they are doing this now.
Oh, that's funny.
I don't know how successful they are, but the question is, what are you testing? No, not the marrow, but bone, the hard part of your bone. Listen, the hard part of your bone is made up of a cell called an osteocyte. That actually is a cell. And so you're getting the DNA. If you're getting DNA from the bone, because that's what they're taking, it's from the osteocyte, the cell of the bone. And the reason bone is what is used in burning cases is obviously because
it's the only thing that's left. Right.
Yeah, right. And it's a hot protected material. So what they can sometimes take they usually bleach the outside or UV irradiate it to get rid of the contamination. And they can sort of either drill or chisel inside and get some of the cells, but it's those bone cells. So yeah, there'll be marrow left.
All right. So it's actually bone cells that they're getting, folks, not any kind of residue off of the bones or anything like that, but they're actually getting parts of the hard bone, which is made of cells, which are
if there are any left. But as
if there's some to be salvaged, right?
But as the one person mentioned, and he was right, there is, and I have references for this. It's often it's very hard. It's very hard to get. Now they are getting, you know, the tests are getting more sensitive, but it's still hard to get.
Mhm. I mean, I gotta imagine if he was identifying people in the California wildfires, those were pretty intense. So,
Right. So that's
you know, seems like it might be pretty good. Okay, so let's move on to the next one here. Let's see. Mick Manning asks, on 11/1/06, Factbender signs out swabs taken from the RAV, and as well as DNA packets and saliva swabs were taken from various people and transported to the Wisconsin Crime Lab. The swabs from the RAV were to be looked at by Sherry Culhane to see if there was enough left on the said swabs for the defense to test. CASO Investigative Report 989 to 990. All this seems fine until you notice for some reason he also brought with him 4 blood swabs from Avery's Grand Am. I think we're gonna have to pass on Mick Manning's question today and leave Mick Manning's question for another day, because we're getting pretty far in at this point, and that is a very complicated and I mean, do you have an answer prepared for that one, Scoop?
he wanted to know why those things were being taken, or can
He's pointing out a lot of paperwork here. I would need to get a little bit more familiar with what he's talking about here to be able to answer this question. But Scooby will be back, Mick.
Yeah.
And we can address this question. We'll earmark this question to be addressed at a later date.
Well, and he is bringing up a big issue, and this is why what again makes this case so complicated is there are, and actually people, I'm still learning of more. There's these times where bizarre pieces of evidence are taken like much at later dates. Like when was this? Like a year later, the next year, back to the lab. It's like, what are they looking at? What are they looking for? And are all of those? And the biggest question I have is Sherry opening all those things on the lab bench at the same time? Because that would be awful.
Right.
And because again, I hope people listen to the Greg Kempian, I can never pronounce his last name, video, because he talks about contamination and how easy it is. And he doesn't talk about this case, but there are cases where they have found samples contaminated from stuff that was tested in the room the day before.
Right.
And thought it was cleaned up, and somehow a little bit of DNA. It's such
lingered. Right.
Yeah. This lab, I just have to, because you hear about how Sherry, I don't know, had it stored in the drawer, and again, that's not, and in the reports we don't know, because we don't know like what day something was done on, and that's why what I would love to get my little paws on would be the raw data, which ideally and who knows with this lab, but ideally they would keep like a log, like you have to do when you work any kind of science lab. Usually you have to write like you have to keep a notebook, like you know what you did on this, I put blah 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 blah. Well, obviously, although that is not in her reports, but it should be somewhere.
Yeah, absolutely.
So we know like what was out at the same time, because as the defense was able to ask for that, all of that material, I assume they did.
Right.
Because then they could say, and those would be things that they could bring up. They could say, well, look, you had this and this out at the same time. That could be contamination. That should be thrown out. They could be real. All you have to do is show doubt.
Right. Yeah.
And I think I could basically show, I mean, if I was playing attorney, which I can do, purposes of this case, I could argue doubt for basically all of their DNA. I may not be correct, but I could ask. I have a lot of questions.
You can make arguments, right?
Right.
Absolutely.
You just don't know. There's a lot.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, next question. Charlie Kane, not exactly about bones or DNA, so I'll answer it quickly. If KZ gets to test the bones and they prove that they belong to Teresa Halbach, what's next? So basically, that is where Casey gets back into court and she starts arguing about how the fact that the presence of Teresa Halbach's bones scattered all over various quarries neighboring the Avery property, but not really on the Avery property itself. She's going to argue that that suggests that this crime took place somewhere else. That's what the whole quick DNA testing of these bones is. That's where that's all leading to, is leading to that argument. Will that argument be ultimately successful? That remains to be seen. Is she going to drop her current appeal just to favor that argument? No, she's not. So she's going to wait until this current appeal is either she's in her evidentiary hearing, or she's got Steve a new trial, or she's going to ride the appeal till the end. And if she's still not satisfied, then she'll bring that. And then if that doesn't work, she'll bring other stuff, because her investigation's ongoing. It's ongoing. She's continuing. That's when probably she'll file about the battery cables, the battery being from a Manitowoc fleet at that time. All that stuff, that'll just be like round 2 if this current appeal doesn't work. But this current appeal should at least produce an evidentiary hearing, because it's freaking ridiculous at this point. The amount of holes that she has shot into the prosecution's case for there to not even be at least a evidentiary hearing, so that the state can get into a courtroom and try to explain to us how some of this stuff makes sense.
Absolutely.
They can attempt.
Yeah, I think they have a lot of answering to do. And like I said, I have, the more I've looked into this, the more questions I have than answers.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. So I guess that's my answer to you, Charla. I hope that kind of covers it for you. And then let's see, we got Tim Rayleigh. I would like to know, how did they figure out that there was a bullet going through the head, other than Brendan saying so? If I remember right, seeing there was 2 holes in the head. Okay, so the reason they say as a bullet went through the head is because of there's beveling on one of the skull fragments, and you'll hear him talk about it in MAM1. And I'll give Scooby a chance to go with this in a second, but it's that beveling that you see on one of the skull fragments that they're saying is indicative of a bullet going through. But I personally think that Chris Palahniuk over at Microtrace, I think he suspects that beveling may have been caused by a hammer, because that is the current theory of how Teresa was killed, is at the back of the RAV4, right by the rear driver's side wheel well, essentially, or kind of right by that corner, and that she was hit with a large hammer-like object that was throwing the type of spatter that we see on the interior of the door. So I believe that's why Chris Palahniuk wants to get those skull fragments, and he wants to get them over to Microtrace and get them under his microscopes there at Microtrace, because I think he suspects that beveling is from a hammer and not from a bullet. Any thoughts, Scoob?
Oh, yeah, I don't know. That's interesting about the hammer theory, but I am not impressed with that. Like I said, with that bullet hole in the skull either. I don't. First of all, we have to remember these are skull fragments. It's not like they found a skull with a hole in it that were put together and then x-rayed. And again, it's Dr. Eisenberg's opinion, and there was some hanky-panky that I think Eric is getting. I think it's time. We're going to have to shut down, I think, and continue on soon with the medical examiner that was the first, and this could be a whole other subject, but the first doctor, the one who supposedly did the autopsy and was involved with the bones, was removed from the case, and I'm suspecting because he's kind of known to be very ethical, and
right.
and he was replaced by someone that Attorney Fallon picked, kind of a buddy of his, who interestingly in another state, basically, to make a long story short, because this is very interesting, but the doctor that originally was involved has testified in 2011 that he was pressured by attorneys in the state, by prosecutors in the state of Wisconsin, one of them being Fallon, to basically lie and say in this other case that there was a skull fracture in it. They wanted to convict a woman of murder, killing her child when it was shaken baby syndrome. There was he said he was pressured to say there was a skull fracture when there wasn't. And he felt
Okay.
guilty about this, that he later came out and said, and this was the one.
It's
that was
amazing how often medical examiners come forward and say stuff like that.
Yes. So there are a couple of, and which does make you think of that, like the Melissa
Kaczynski, yep.
And, same thing.
And the Peterson case.
Yeah. So
Stairway.
he basically said, so interestingly, he was booted out then and replaced with one of the people who did go along with the skull fracture story in this particular case by Phelan. So anyway, just a little interest. So these, like I said, I think forensic anthropology is part art and part science. And there is a lot of art to it. And so I'm not a bullet hole. It could be, I'm not.
Right. That's not your expertise.
But
he does make a good point, because Skip Palahniuk has looked at that bullet and he has determined that there is no bone matter. There is no human flesh matter. All there is some little fragments of wood and some little fragments of paint. And that's all that's on that bullet.
I'll just say, and now I'll get personal. I don't personally believe, I think they could have made that look like a bullet hole. It could be anything.
Right.
It's a burnt piece of a skull fragment. So that means Eisenberg's opinion means nothing to me. I don't believe the bullet went through Teresa's head, or Teresa. I don't think she was shot in the garage. I don't think anything happened at Avery's garage or salvage yard.
Roll Griffin here he asks a question that makes an assumption. Here he says, "What are the possible sources for Teresa's DNA on the bullet? FL, Pap smear or something else?" Is that how you believe the DNA got there? That's why I say it makes an assumption.
Yeah, toothbrush. Well, there's lots of different levels, or there never could have been any DNA. There's
right.
Oh, I'll link you guys this article. This is really scary, because if they really wanted to, planting can get really sophisticated now, because you can actually, if you know someone's sequence, you can make DNA. Basically that's what PCR.
Oh crap!
There's someone in here.
That's the last thing we needed. Oh,
so
Jesus.
You can I have a video of this guy who's working on creating DNA digitally. Anyway, but so. And there actually is a term called dry labbing. So, the possibilities are endless. It could be that there never was any DNA at all. They just said there was. Or it could have been, and which would implicate, our friend Sherry. I don't know. Or there could have been something put on there from, and again, they could have put DNA. They had extracted DNA. They could have taken extracted DNA and just stuck it on there. But then it could have been Pepsi. It could have been, I don't know what they collected a lot of stuff that was inevitable. It could have been from a hairbrush. I think they had a hairbrush of hers. And by the way, a hairbrush, it's the scalp cells that are good sources. Toothbrush, floss, any of the stuff that they took, they could get cells. I'm thinking, that they could stick on that if they actually did.
Yeah.
But it was probably something like that. But I don't believe, because there'd be.
I'm thinking probably not the Pap. If it was anything, it's probably I'm thinking like a toothbrush or something.
Yeah,
probably.
I don't think it was the Pap either, because Paps don't. They don't
to get the DNA there. It's going to be messier than it is with a toothbrush. I mean, it's just
and that doesn't get you a good profile usually.
Right, exactly. You don't know if she was possibly getting it on the night before, and there might be a mixture of DNA in there. Not saying anything untoward. I'm just saying you never know. That's a possibility.
Well, and those cells are like fixed on a slide. It would just be harder. A toothbrush would be easier. Rubbing them on the pen.
Exactly. You just walk up to it and just kind of rub the bristles with your lab glove on, and rub the bristles over the thing you're kind of going for, right? And that's going to show. That's going to.
Who knows what they have? If you go through, like if you went through my bathroom garbage potato, you could probably pull out a few things. I floss my teeth every day, so
Right, 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 right.
Old springs of dental floss, who knows? We could
Yeah,
get
absolutely. Dental floss certainly would have it.
together.
Saliva. Yeah, absolutely. So, okay, so that takes care of that question. Could bone marrow be used to test for DNA? In this case, I think we've pretty well established no, there would be no marrow left, right?
Yeah, no. You'd have to have a bone to have marrow, like a bone that looks like a bone. This marrow has been long cooked.
So, yeah, and that was essentially Angie's question. So, no, Angie, the bone marrow would be gone by now.
But I mean, it could be bone marrow could be used to test for DNA
It could be
a
used, right?
marrow, right? If that's the question.
If it remained.
But there wasn't any here.
There wasn't going to be any here, right? So that's where we're at with this. But yes, it could be used. So there we go. That's the absolutely strictly correct answer to that question. So okay, let's see. Magunra is asking. I have a key question. Do you know where my car? Oh yeah, you read that one already.
I'm trying to teach Scooby to find my car keys, but we haven't made much progress.
Right.
Where is he? He's sleeping somewhere. He's not even participating in the chat. Where is he? Oh well.
Yeah, he's busy corresponding with me all day, lining you up. So
Yes. He's actually looking at you. He's watching.
What's up, Scoobs?
Scoob says, "I'm sleeping."
Yeah, let me sleep, dude. That's funny. Okay, let's see here. Mick Manning's got another one. Looks like another longer one. Let's see here. KZ and the others tend to think that the body was burnt to make it easier to plant the bones on Avery's salvage yard to frame him. Yet, the killers managed to plant the RAV4. I think it is more likely it was to cover cause of death. Do you think that burning the body would cover the cause of death, such as drug overdose, but leave enough bones and some flesh so that they can claim the remains are Teresa Hallback? And if so, are we to assume that it would be someone who knows more than the average deer hunter? Okay.
Yes, I love this question.
You love that question? Go ahead, have at it.
Because this is actually my while I on one hand I say I don't theorize, but in private I theorize. But now you guys are being getting to listen to some of my private thoughts, which might be a little scary. But absolutely, I think that is why she was burned. Because think about it: if you're going to frame someone for murder, which I believe personally, this is my personal belief now.
Yep.
Happened, you have to make things match. So if you're going to say like Stephen Avery beat her over the head with a 2x4, well, then you've got to have like the right indentations on his hands and the right,
right
thing on her head and the right piece of wood, or if you're going to say he shot her, then that's tricky to get the victim to match up with the crime you said happened and the perpetrator. So
right.
For instance, if they're going to say the crime went down like it did, well, then you'd have to have her bloody,
the forensics of her body have to fit that.
You'd have to simulate a rape, you'd have to get some semen, this will be, that's a lot of work.
Right.
So by burning the body, you didn't have to worry about anything that might not fit. Like
right.
They could say, well, like often,
it creates a huge absence of evidence, but
right.
In that absence, it allows them to fill the absence with other crap.
Right, because anything could have happened. They could say anything, and they can't prove it one way or another. And look how excited Scooby just got. That's funny because see how smart your people are. They're thinking.
Oh, they are.
They think like me. No, I'm just that.
They're sharp as a tack.
I mean, there are. You guys are. You don't need me really, but I mean, like a lot of this is just common sense. But that's kind of my theory, and I think now, and I didn't know like anybody about these other burn. Oh, but I'll just say one thing because this gets me excited even more so now. But because you guys know about the unidentified male profile,
right?
By those bones,
yeah,
in the quarry. That okay? Now we know, and I didn't know about the cut marks, which means that yeah, if there were cut marks on those bones, that means that body was
Chopped
cut
up.
up, and the jury never heard that. But so now you have these different bird piles. You've got an unidentified male profile.
And
And
cut
did
marks
they
on
investigate
bones.
that? No, and actually shared by these bones.
Yeah.
Now, wouldn't you just? But the problem.
And we know
is that-
Stephen was not much of a hunter. Didn't really have the little toolkit to to dismember a deer. That
Well,
the guys that
and
were
whose-
adept at that lived over in the Dassey trailer.
yeah, and whose profiles do we have to compare it to? Well, my
Not
Avery,
Scott's.
Alan Avery,
Right.
not Scott, right? We don't have
Right.
any DNA from
Not
Scott.
Scott's.
So that's the problem. They didn't take DNA samples from anybody that could potentially be.
The way I've heard it is Scott has been avoiding. That's the way I heard it.
Yeah, so that's the
There's a
problem.
rumor. There's a rumor even going around right now that Scott picks up all of his cigarette butts.
somebody told me that. Well, yeah, I imagine that Zellner, I have to think with Zellner's resources that she's got someone up there trailing
Yeah. She's got a little short round, like from Indiana Jones and the Temple of
hanging out
Doom.
at
Scott.
McDonald's. I say, if any of you go to visit Manitowoc and eat out, take a straw, use a straw, and take it with you. Or you might find yourself, hit up for a cold case. Don't drink out of anything, in other words. Tossed out or sent to the kitchen to be swabbed. That's Scooby's advice for the night.
All right, there we go. That's your takeaway, folks. No, we gotta probably have more takeaways here. Let's see. Roll Griffin's asking, what does the 7 Loki mtDNA result mean for the actual odds of the bones being Teresa Hallbach's, as opposed to Sherry's BS story about this? So I guess what is the real probabilities on the 7 Loki match?
Well, you see, the problem with this is it's a judgment call, and there are no standards. I think the problem is you can't unknow what you already know. They knew that it wasn't good enough for there's also a quality issue, and this is going to be I'll try to say this in a way that hopefully people will understand.
Mm-hmm.
If your test only tested for 7 loci and you got all of the loci, then you'd say that was a good test. That was an experiment that worked. But if your test was supposed to get 16 results and you only got 7, that meant there's a problem. And which is why, again, in this case, I would love to see those graphs, those electropherograms, because you wonder about the quality. Basically, what a lot of people would argue is that the quality of the sample was so poor that you can't necessarily even trust those results that you did get. Right. So it makes me wonder, well, were those sort of questionable? And people that watch the videos will understand what I mean because he shows some in both of the videos, they show some examples of when questionable peaks and when you have to make judgments. And so it makes you wonder, because I just know from, and then there's the, oops, I did the, sorry, I'm trying not to do that.
Everybody take a drink.
Drink. So if, I have a lot of questions as to why, first of all, this tissue, that makes sense because the DNA would be really degraded and tissue would be burnt. But I wouldn't expect her to get any decent results. But the reason they sent it on to the FBI to do the mitochondrial DNA testing was because they knew the result. They wouldn't have bothered if it was so good.
Right.
There also is a term called source attribution. And again, it's up to the judgment of the analyst, but they don't, and this is a problem with the crime labs, is that there are, again, the technology advanced further than the law, so there are no rules.
Oh, I see.
They use these statistics, but again, there's other problems. So what I would say is it could possibly, belong to her, but
Right.
it could 50% possibly belong to somebody else.
Right.
I don't.
But what do they? I mean, isn't it like 1 in 100,000, 1 in 600,000, or something when you have a 7 Loki match?
Well, Sherry said 1 in a billion, but I haven't seen exactly how she got that math.
Okay. Okay.
Um,
That answers the question. That was what I was getting at. Because that's what he was specifically asking, because he clearly says Sherry's BS story. So I know that's what he wanted to tie in on that. So
Yeah, so I don't know, but the other thing surrounding that is, of course, there's questions about what she actually tested and where she got. So it's not even just the test then, because the bone that she says that she had. Well, first of all, if you had tissue from the bone, Dr. Eisenberg testified that there was one bone, again, the magic bone. We got the
yes,
magic bullet and the
the
magic
shin bone.
the
Right.
one shin bone, which there's never any. I think it was Officer Pevito, and I haven't looked at this material in such a long time. He was the
Right.
first one on the scene of the bonfire area in the
Right.
essay yard. Well, for this bone to look unburned and have flesh on it, somehow I would expect it to have gotten out of the fire.
Yes. That would
Because
stand to
otherwise
reason.
it would have been burnt earlier. Otherwise, it would have been burned to smithereens. Which my theory is, again, that whoever chopped up the body kept out a piece to be used intentionally to try to get an ID. But
Right.
if you had tissue, the bone would be in a lot better shape. Leslie Eisenberg testified that there was this non-burned. I believe that was the phrase she used, non-burned. And I have this all in my computer that died. The which I am getting. Oh, that's another tech issue I have to deal with. My hard drive off of that, but I have help. Anyway, the she testified there was this one non-burned appearing bone, so it appeared non-burned. Well, the mitochondrial DNA labs, that's what they do, burn bone. They love that's why didn't they test that? She says that she sent that bone directly to the FBI, but the FBI has no record of receiving a bone. All they have is what they retitled Q1, which was a piece of charred remains, which I'm assuming is the charred tissue that Sherry
She cut away. Right.
Did Sherry send it to them? There's no chain of custody. And all of this stuff goes through this guy in Milwaukee. I forgot his name. He's like the FBI go-to guy for the region. And so why would the FBI use, well, I've never heard of it, doesn't mean it doesn't exist, but a mitochondrial DNA lab using grungy muscle tissue if they have this beautiful bone.
Right. Yeah, absolutely.
And Sherry doesn't say, so this is, again, we can't say she doesn't lie, but she implies that she cut her tissue from the same bone that Eisenberg is talking about because she used the same picture.
Right.
Okay. But according to Eisenberg, she never sent the bone to Sherry. So someone's either not, I'll say it.
I know. Right.
Someone's not remembering correctly.
It's the Keystone Coppers. Nobody can tell what the hell they were doing.
So again, I just have a lot of questions, and if they can explain it to me, great. Maybe there's legitimate reasons for all of this stuff. I just
maybe monkeys will fly out of Paul Capaldi's butt. Who knows?
Yeah. So
sorry, just had to pick on Paul Capaldi a little bit there, folks.
So, but what was a good test? The mitochondrial DNA, if it is truly, if that tissue, I don't know, whatever means anything. The mitochondrial DNA test was a good test. if that was like a strict missing persons case and there was not all this hanky-panky and extraneous factors and other weirdness and
Right.
everything was normal, you'd say, okay, I trust that. This
These
is my
few
person.
oddities wouldn't make a big deal, but it's the accumulation. Right. I've been
Right.
saying that too. I've been pounding on that. It's the
But see,
freaking
it was-
accumulation.
Yeah, so it was really the mitochondrial DNA test that supported Sherry's test. Sherry's test,
Right.
but see, the jury didn't hear that, but they already did because they did that in the press conference.
Right.
Those bones were really identified, or bone fragment. I just say bones, but you know what?
Yeah, we know what you mean. Yeah.
And
Trust me,
remain-
you'll evolve the school here as we go forward.
Yeah, none of it's just easier than to explain, but really no bones were tested. And I don't know where that. Oh, what I was going to say before was, so I would think that unburned or non-burned appearing fragment would have been out on the lawn, because Pevito, I think it was him, testified that he found a piece of what he thought was a spine. And I don't know how good
Right.
at
A vertebrae.
anatomy these
It was
monsters are.
it's Sturdivant is who it was.
So, yes, thank you. I may not have the name. Yeah, name's right. But anyway, he said he saw a piece of what he thought was a spine. But I
Right.
don't hear any mention of the. Well, he might have not
The
known it
hip
was a
bone or whatever.
this
Right.
bone. And then there was something else. He was moving around with a stick. But I mean,
Right.
I would think
Yeah.
they would know that's a no-no. I mean,
Right.
so
So okay, so L. Fallon's asking, does Scooby think the 7 alleles are enough to certainly pronounce the bones as THs? I think we're saying that 7 alleles is possibly enough, or how do you feel about that?
no. Okay, here's what the actually, that's why they do the statistics. They're telling you this is where you have to use your own judgment. I can't say I saw no.
So you would need to see the outcoming data from the testing.
According to the Wisconsin State Crime Lab, it's not enough to do what they call source attribution. So
Okay.
they could, even though, and somebody pointed this out, the lingo, the semantics get kind of,
Okay.
fuzzy here.
So we'll
but
put a pin in that.
They
for another
couldn't
day.
say that Teresa Hallbuck was the source of those remains, but they could say, and I believe he directly, Buting, when he's cross-examining Sherry, he does bring this up. Because he says how you can say the blood is, in some other case came from, but you can't say this with the bones. And she says, yes, but I can tell you there are these odds. There's this 1 in a billion odds.
Oh, okay.
So
and you don't know how she came to that conclusion.
How convincing that is to you.
Okay.
And the way that I need to get my whiteboard to show you how they do, how they get these big numbers too, because they treat each of these loci as an independent variable. So
right.
The way that you do the odds, so if you have, let's say at one loci, the odds are 1 out of 10 that it's a match.
Right.
Theory. So if at the second loci it's 1 out of 10, then they just multiply them.
Okay.
So by the time you get into 7, you're getting into like billion.
Yeah. And I will say the video I was watching before this, one of the ones you'd sent over, the guy was talking about how different labs put different multipliers on things. Exactly. So there's like really no standard.
Absolutely. And that's the other thing. Yeah. And it depends on the software that they use and who they buy it, because this is big, and it's kind of, it's good and bad. It's big business now. So there's different companies marketing.
Right.
So different labs use different software. They have different statistics. There's absolutely no, right. He points it out. You could send it to a different lab and get a different statistics.
Right. Yeah. So that, like I said, everybody, it'll be interesting for you to check out those couple of videos when Denise posts them at the end, which we're getting down to the end of the questions here. And then we'll obviously have a few more from the live.
Yeah.
But
I think
just
we all need to be educated. Let me just get on my soapbox, because we need reform. We need a lot of, I don't want to get the DNA tests are good, but how they're being used, there are a lot of problems. Like what we're seeing. Yes, we are seeing innocent people being exonerated, thank God. But what we're seeing in this case, and what we're seeing more, are innocent people being convicted or framed with DNA evidence, and that's
Right.
a problem because it can be misused, and we need and there's no standards and there's no oversight, and it's just getting worse as the technology improves. So
Right.
we all need to start working on it.
Taking an interest.
Yeah. Well, and that's, like I said, that's one good positive thing that came out of this for me. You know, I was just one of those oblivious sheep, assuming everything was okay before.
Me too. And then slowly, after watching MAM, I suddenly found myself turning into an activist, and here I am now.
Right. Well, I was trying to be objective. I thought, well, because you know what everybody says, oh, the documentary was so biased and they made things so bad. Well, my gosh, the real life was so much worse. The documentary makes them look a lot better.
I love it. TikTok Manitowoc on Twitter the other day was saying, I believe it was Erekose MAM who said all the guilters claim that we've been duped by a documentary and everything. Well, then, you know, and then points out the fact that we're constantly looking in and reading the case documents or whatever. So I responded I first of all liked and retweeted it because I thought it was funny. But then I responded to it saying, yeah, you'd think the first thing that would tip them off is that the thing that we're always posting is documents and not clips from the documentaries.
Right. I don't even...
But yeah, I thought that was funny when TikTok posted that. But so yeah, I mean that's notorious that the guilters do that. Hey, Stacy Seabrook is with us here in the chat, folks. How's it going, Stacy?
Stacy, I love your music. I didn't know anything about that until I started watching you again recently. That is, I just love it. Is there going to be I still call them albums. Is there going to be?
He's actually, he's slowly uploading tunes to iTunes, and I think he's now got about 4 or 5 of them there, kind of forming the beginnings of an album. So yeah, go look up Stacy Seabrook on iTunes. In fact, Denise may post the link for it here, or Marissa might. One of my moderators might post the link to his iTunes. But yeah, he's been going into the studio. Oh shoot, Scooby's gonna bust out a guitar.
Scooby and I are huge fans. I play the guitar very poorly, but Scooby and I are huge fans, Stacy. Thank you.
Awesome.
Yeah, I'm going to try to strum along and sing. You'll hear me singing on the video.
All right. Hey, Stacy, when we're in Manitowoc for the rally this year, we got to go over and see Scooby and do a little jam session.
I'll do that. Is Stacy from Wisconsin, the area?
Stacy is from Canada. He's the western edge of Canada.
Oh, okay. Okay, well, he can come. That's close enough.
That's what I'm saying. If we're all there for rally time, then him and I can just scoot over to check out you, and we can do a little jam session.
Oh, yeah.
Or you'll probably be there at the rally, too. Maybe we'll just have the jam session at the rally.
Sounds wonderful.
It will be fun. I love it. All these people that we didn't previously know, we're all coming together and forming a community, brotherhood, as it were. It's awesome seeing people come together and work together, and
it is.
It's amazing to watch. So I guess at this point we're going to open it up for, let's say, 3 questions for now. And let's see if there's 3 more questions for Scooby, because I think we're both getting a little tired here. Are you, Scooby, or are you good? Do you want to go more?
I could talk I'm excited talking with Jay, but it has been a long time. I know you can only absorb so much. So
oh, that's what I'm saying.
And
yeah,
I think you're getting tired. So.
It's been a lot. It's been a lot here for everybody to absorb. So I'm thinking it might be good
to think about it.
To break it up.
I think we'll do small doses. Like I had told a couple people, we're hoping to make this like a regular thing.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh, thank you, Spicy. That's from Jerome. That's the Belgian flag. Wanted to still be able to show off all my other signs of international support back here, so I had to move it up to the ceiling in between the speakers there. Glad you like it. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt, Scooby.
I didn't say anything.
I was just answering some things in the chat here.
Yeah, go.
Somebody says, can Scooby explain proper storage of DNA evidence?
Well, I mean, ideally, there's like the scientific gold standard, and then there's what those crime or forensics people do. So I think ideally, if you were going to use blood, you know, for long-term testing, again, it would be frozen, and then, you know, second best would be refrigerated. But
Right.
I'm not sure if these crime labs
Do
or
that.
not crime labs, because it's stored by the
Yeah, it's stored by like the police agencies that gathered it, right?
So yeah, I think they just like store it in like an envelope somewhere.
That's what I think too. I mean, look at
That's what it seems like when I watch those shows.
when I looked at what the evidence room in the Atlanta Police Department looked like in 1996. I was just like, oh yeah, they're not really taking care of any of this evidence. It became pretty freaking clear when I saw that. It was a mess.
So if you have, you know, for some things it might be okay. You know, if you've got a large amount of blood, you know, it might still be okay. But obviously, with time, stuff is going to degrade. But
Right.
you know, it still might be good for some things.
Right. So Marissa is.
You're not looking at medical grade testing, but
Okay.
it's I guess it's the best they can do. I suppose they can't afford to, or probably they're not. They're assuming most of the time it's not going to be retested.
Right. So Marissa asks, and I think this is a really good question here. Hopefully you're able to answer. Are epithelial cells under a microscope different looking? In other words, if you took, say, cheek cells from somebody and from, say, a young lady, and then took, say, some of her like vaginal cells and compared those, would they look the same or would they look different?
They would look different.
They would look different?
Yeah.
Okay. So there's your answer, Marissa. They would look different. And I think that's going to lead her to the next question of, well, how come they can't kind of tell what these cells were then, right? But obviously these things degrade, right?
Yeah, because that's if you like have like a fresh
sample.
Like a fresh, like you just did like a pap smear.
Okay.
Or you raped someone, or you just did a book. So you've got like nice, fresh.
Okay. So to tell that difference, it needs to be ultra fresh.
Yeah. If you were looking at something like that was laying around, you know, the cellular, you know, the cell membranes shrivel and the proteins decay and things.
Right.
Probably on something that's been laying around on something, I would think probably would be that might not be.
It dries out, possibly even was in the sun, you know.
Right.
So
it might not even look like a cell anymore.
Right, exactly. So then Travis asks, the FBI result on the mitochondrial DNA, consistent with, what does that mean? I guess when they say it's consistent with in their analysis.
Oh, okay. Well, you know, so because of course scientists are never going to say, because none of this, you know, you can never say absolutely. And I'll have to, and again, I apologize because I do not have all my reports handy because I was totally into these, but
yeah,
I can't remember the exact wording that was used, but they're always going to use no scientist, unlike the press conference is never going to say these are, or these are. I thought that they used excluded. She could not be excluded in the mitochondrial report.
Okay.
So Teresa, because they didn't even say Teresa Hallbuck, because this is also what bothered me about the mitochondrial DNA. And I don't know, just so it's in real quick, and I don't know if this is an FBI thing, if this is generally what they do. But see, they did not compare the tissue against something from Teresa Hallbuck. They just used her mother. Now, sometimes in missing persons cases, they'll use a relative if they don't have anything from the missing person, like the soldier, if they've been gone too long. But I don't know, maybe that's just what they do. But that was a little, so they said that there was, and again, and then of course there's statistics. There is basically what that the mitochondrial DNA statistics and the language is different than the STR profiles. So what
Right.
they do is they actually sequence a part of the DNA. And they said that, and then they put it into they actually have a database that had about 1,700 profiles. And first of all, they could say that they had never seen that profile before. So it didn't belong to it didn't match any other family, but there's only 1,700 in there from all over the country. So that's a problem with the FBI database, as opposed to the science database that has now, I believe, 60,000 mitochondrial DNA sequences in it from all over
Right.
the world.
Right.
Anyway, that are transparent, and you can actually look up the actual sequences. That's a problem with the FBI, but so they're never going to say, because they can't say,
Right.
can't, that this, they couldn't say
They couldn't say anything absolutely definitive.
this belongs to Teresa Halbach, because they didn't compare it to anything from Teresa Halbach.
Right.
All they could say was that it was whatever they said, I believe it was consistent with the sample. The profile was similar.
Uh-oh. Oh, man, just when we were almost done. Foiled again by Scooby's Wi-Fi. Dang it. So I think that's going to be it, folks. Scooby may pop back in here in a second. But I think we've thrown enough information at all of you today for you to be sufficiently overloaded. I'm sure you can count on seeing Scooby in the Hangouts after this. She'll probably want to come talk with everybody about this a little bit. If not, she'll be there eventually at some point for you to talk with her.
I got cut off for a minute, but anyway, it's they said the language in such a way that yes, it could be. There is and I believe the statistic was at a 5% confidence interval, which is a statistics term. There's a 97% chance that these two profiles are matching by chance.
Right.
That's basically what the wording language of the report was. So in other words, it's likely that the tissue and Karen Halbach are related. And
okay, right.
And they're inferring that the tissue then is Teresa.
Okay, right. Okay. So that's what they're referring to consistent with. Right.
And that would be considered a positive result. However, I think in one of those videos they talk about, yes, they do. I think Greg does talk about the positive tests at because the FBI, see, then there's like there are some good mitochondrial DNA labs. The military, there's some private ones like called mitotyping. The FBI, I'm not so sure about, but he talks about that one case where the guy was his bones were identified by mitochondrial DNA, and he had a funeral and everything, and then he was alive. It turns out he was alive.
No, right. Yes. I saw that in the video I was watching. That was interesting.
So it's none of this is foolproof. It's not. So that's why they say science is never going to say absolutely. Those bones are absolutely. We've confirmed they're Teresa. No, they could be. They could.
Right. Be. Right. So okay.
And then you have to take the other things. So again, like I said, if you're looking at the remains from your son who was a soldier in Vietnam, and he happened to be, and there was a match, and he was in a place at one time, and you have no other sons, and you take everything else into context, and you are comfortable with those results. So I guess that's what people have to, and that's what I can't answer, or nor can anyone answer. You have to take all of the information,
right?
And take
the raw data, as you put it.
The test on paper, the mitochondrial test does look good. However, it wasn't used in court, but we already know about it, so it doesn't matter. But then you have to take it into everything else into context, and then you have to decide, how do I feel about these results? And that's up to all of you.
Well, it's been a pleasure having you, Scooby. I think we're going to cease to overload everybody's brains here for the evening. and because I'm sure we have thrown quite a lot of information at him here tonight. Good questions, everybody. Really good
You know
questions.
what? If you leave having more questions, then that's great.
Right.
Then you've done your job. Then you're progressing well. Well, if
Right.
you're more confused and have less certain, then you're on.
That's how you know you're making progress at first, when you're feeling more confused than you did the day before.
Yes.
At first. Eventually it turns around.
Thank you, everyone, and always be kind to one another.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay.
So it's been a pleasure, Scooby. We're going to go ahead and listen to some Stacy Seabrook on the way out.
Good.
And if you want to join Hangouts and have a chat with some of these folks, I'm
I'll
sure they
pour
would
another
love it.
glass of wine if anyone wants to chat. I got.
All right. Yeah, go on into Hangouts into Cozy's Wrecking Crew, and I'm sure there are going to be lots of people there that'll be excited to talk to you. And but we'll play a little Stacy on the way out here.
Right.
And
thanks for inviting me, Eric, and have a.
Oh, it's a pleasure to have you. Thank you for coming. Oops.
Power on. Connection successful.
There's something going on. Freedom is in danger.
I hope you all found it very interesting and informative. We will obviously be having Scooby back at a later date. I don't know when that date is right now, so don't ask. But we will be having her back.
They needed someone, oh, Jody wouldn't flip. They looked around, saw him quick. Oh, it made so much sense. Why? Oh, Brendan Dassey, he was.
And Denise, you can throw up those links to those videos that Scooby wanted everybody to watch.
In Wisconsin, that's not kosher. We better stop. Let's all take a look closer. Oh, they will sacrifice your kid. Oh, Brendan Dassey, that's exactly what they did. They visit him once, they visit him twice. They make him feel so safe. Sandwiches, soda, so nice. No cameras.
Ah, my speaker's dead. Well, folks,
Great. Are you still there, Eric?
that's about it for now, I guess. Because my little Bluetooth speaker has died, unfortunately. But
We wore
it's
it
been
out.
fun. It's been a pleasure speaking with you, Scooby. Oh, I see you're back, so I'm going to put my headphones back on. It was an absolute pleasure speaking with you. And
Same here.
yeah, I look forward to doing it again. Allie's already asking when. We don't know yet, Allie. Give us the time to
Oh yeah, I'm getting down.
yeah. Unfortunately, my little speaker died, so sorry, everybody.
Well, I'm so glad. I'm going to download these tunes from iTunes now.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. The ones on iTunes. The one on iTunes are really good too, because those are the ones he's taken into the studio, and he's actually done a little bit more production on them. And those ones are really, really nice. TikTok Mad to Walk is just like tight. It's just so tight. It's such a perfect song. It's great.
Yeah. Well, then I'll be able to sing along. Oh yeah, Scooby and I are going to be playing those for sure.
So somebody's asking me, could they create a hangout for you where they could periodically post questions? Or would you want to wait a little bit longer to get up to speed with some of the newer stuff before you did something like that?
No, we could do something like that. I just need to know how to do it.
Okay.
Yeah.
We can set you up and with a hangout there, and
yeah.
And we can start passing the link out during lives and stuff like that, so that people will know that they can go there to talk to you.
Yeah, that would be great, because yeah,
I know a lot of people are eager to hear lots of people like you, Scooby. They just can't get enough. Scooby by the barrelful.
I love all them. I've learned so much from just listening to all of your videos and the comments from people. I've been, a long time listener.
Yeah. Well, folks like you and the Wrecking Crew and all that, you guys keep me going. You guys keep me inspired. So
You have me excited again. I walked away.
Yep.
I said,
Yep.
No more, no more. But now, obviously, I'm too excited again.
But you listened to me and you walked back. You came back.
I have.
So
Once,
there you go.
I'm out of MAM rehab. I'm back, back on the addiction, back on the drug.
Right. All righty. So it's been a pleasure having you, Scooby. Thank you for being here. Everybody in chat, thank you for a lot of smart conversation and everything over here. Thank you for all the questions that were submitted. They were really good.
Yes, thank you. They're great questions and great insight. Obviously, you guys really,
Yes, absolutely. Great job, guys. And if you haven't already, please hit subscribe, and we'll see you.
Okay. Yes, and hit the like for Eric.
Oh yes, please hit the like button, everybody. As T1 says, Hulk smash the like button. There you go.